Hello everybody. Today I'm going to show a very unique method of transferring data from OneDrive to Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive to Google Drive without downloading them and directly using a service from Microsoft to Google, which means you will not be using the bandwidth of your network. They will be directly transferred from Microsoft to Google. There are some existing issues which I will explain in the next few slides. This is my test case. Every month I share some files with some clients. These are new files and not updates of existing files. This is very important. These are not updates of existing files. So I create a new file for every client every month, and I share these files through Google folders in Google Drive. But I create the files in Microsoft OneDrive because they are using Microsoft Office. I create them using Microsoft Office. So that's my test case. So it has to be automatically. Once they are created in Microsoft OneDrive, they have to be transferred into Google Drive and in a particular folder which I share with the client. There are three limitations that I know of. If there are nested folders, folders inside folders, this method does not work. Files from nested folder do not get transferred to destination folder. This is based on my experience. Unless you are trying to transfer data from a nested folder to a root folder in Google Drive. Basically, if there are multiple levels of nesting in both sides, it doesn't work. Files move from one MS Drive, OneDrive folder to a receiving Google Drive folder without any subfolders. If you had files previously in the source OneDrive folder before the connection, then they will not move automatically after connection to destination folder in Google Drive. But if you bring them to the OneDrive folder after connection is made to the Google Drive, then they will move to the Google Drive. Which means if you had originally few files in that MS OneDrive, that folder, they will not move. So you have to first create the connection when they are empty. If you remove files from the source directory, which is the Microsoft OneDrive folder, they are not deleted from the destination folder, which is good in some ways. The third and last limitation is if you update a file without changing the file name, then it does not update the Google Drive file which was there previously. Let's say you create a file called file X, then you update file X. It will not update file X in Google Drive. This is understandable because Google creates an updated version if you create the file with the same name of the existing file and needs your permission to update the file to a new version. And it cannot ask you that permission, so it doesn't happen. So I'm in my Microsoft OneDrive. I could have also done it from my Internet File Explorer, which is here. I could have done it from here too in Microsoft. This is OneDrive, but I'm doing it from the web services, the web interface. So I create a folder called test1. I mean, I could have called it anything I wanted. So here you see I created a folder called test1 and there is nothing inside it. That's the important thing. There is nothing inside it. Now what I do is that I go into Google Drive, my Google Drive, and I create a folder. So let me go in. So I'm creating a new folder here in my Google Drive, and I'm calling it test2, just for the heck of it. I'm calling it test2. So you can see here is test2, and it has nothing inside it. Okay. Now I go into Microsoft Office. By the way, I have a subscription to Office 365, and there is a nifty tool in Office 365. It's called Power Automate. I click on my Microsoft Power Automate. This Power Automate is also sometimes called RPA, or Robotic Process Automation. I mean, please don't get scared by all these names. They really do not mean too much. As you can see, I already have many flows, and some are running for 2 years, some are running for 6 months. Anyhow, I have flows running here for a long time. There is also a desktop version of Power Automate, which you can install, but I do not think these connectors are there in the desktop version in this form. These are very easy to use connectors, and I am going to use one of these connectors and show you what I am going to do. Now when you go into these connectors, these are actually nothing but services in wrappers. Okay, now I'm going a little bit in technical terms. Let me say these are nothing but flows. So you can see there are many flows. The one I will be using, the second one, sync new OneDrive files to Google Drive files. So this is what I'm trying to do, OneDrive files to Google Drive files. Now I do not have OneDrive for business. This is the OneDrive personal use. So I am using this this is already built in by somebody in Microsoft. There is also something which you will see here, which is recurring connection. You see, copy files from OneDrive to Google Drive on a recurring basis. So you can use any one which you need, but I am just using this one. When I click on this one, then this is what I get. You see, OneDrive to Google Drive. This is OneDrive to Google Drive. And the OneDrive is tied to my OneDrive, but the Google Drive is tied. I'm going to tie it to my Google Drive. So this is the OneDrive, which is tied to my email address, and the Google Drive is connected to my second email address. I hit continue. Now in the OneDrive, in the root directory, if you remember, I created a file called test1. So I choose that. And in the Google Drive, if you remember, I created a file called test2. So I connect that and I say create. So I essentially created a flow. I created a flow called sync new OneDrive files from OneDrive to Google Drive. Now I'll go into edit mode. I will see what is there and what that file looks like. You see, it says as it says, when the file is created in the OneDrive, that means when you are creating a file in the OneDrive, then create the same file in Google Drive. Very simple, very simple. Now, going back, I will, in the flows, I will rename it as, or I can rename it as edit. Let me see how I can rename it. Yeah, test flow for OneDrive to Google Drive. Oh, anyway, so this is the file. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, and one important thing about is that it can be turned off or turned on. You can turn on or off the flow. It's a switch, kind of a switch. And you can check the flow, it's working or not. That's very important that you check it, that it's doing its job. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go into test drive and I'm going to drop a couple of files there. So let's say I'm going to my downloads. I just had a couple of files. I just downloaded this in there in the Microsoft. You see, you can it's uploading the two files in the Microsoft OneDrive test1 folder. So I have to make sure. So one is 2.24 MB and the other one is 6.13 MB. Okay, and it's not shared with anybody. I mean, you can share it also. Now flow checker, I go to flow checker. So flow checker, I will try to run this. I will try to run this flow and see if it works or not. Okay. So I go back to my original set of flows. In my flows, you can see I have this now test flow for copying files from OneDrive to Google Drive, the one I created 1 minute ago. I select it and I say edit. And I do a testing. I do a test. I do manually because automatically it does run at a certain interval. Sometimes it can be 10 minutes, sometimes it can be 30 minutes, sometimes it can be 2 hours. Those triggers, I mean, there is no such given time for those triggers. It depends on when Microsoft runs the services in the background and the triggers are started. But anyhow, I will manually start it now. Now let's see what's happening. Let's see. You see, a message came up here. Your flow ran successfully. It took 6 seconds on the file created side and 2 seconds on the file copying side to Google Drive. So let's go back to our Google Drive and see what happened there. You see, these two files have been copied. I mean, this is really very easy method. So now what I'm going to do is that I am going to go and take the third file. I'm going to take the third file and copy into this OneDrive folder. I'm going to copy this VFC10K folder. It's copying it. So please note the name here, VFC10K. That's a new folder, new file. And I am going to delete this 2.4 MB file, which is the Q4 financial year earning, not the shareholder letter, but the earning. I'm going to delete that. Okay, so I added a file and deleted a file. So here, one new file should be added and one file should be deleted. The 2.2 MB file should be deleted and one new file should be added. So I am going to go back. I'm going to go to the edit and test again. I'm going to run it manually again. And then you see it again says it ran successfully. File created 2 seconds and file created 2 seconds. I go back here. I see the 10K file here, but the other file has not been deleted. As I was saying, if you delete something, it doesn't get deleted. That's a drawback. Now, if you had originally created these folders here and had the files in there and then tried to connect it to the Google folder, Google Drive folder, then these files would not have transferred. Only the new files which are put in the OneDrive folder after the connection, they are transferred. Now here in the edit mode, if you if you test, you can set them as automatic and then it will do it automatically at its own time. But normally once you save it, then, and if it is turned on, which is important, if it is turned on, then it runs automatically based on the trigger it gets from Microsoft OneDrive that a new folder file has been added. And you don't have to do anything else really. Another great thing about this process is that once the process has automatically run once after you updated the OneDrive folder, you put a new file there. Once it automatically the process flow runs, then it's going to send you an email telling the process has been successful or not. So under the updates, you are going to get such an email saying that the process has been successful, etc. And you can then share that Google folder, or even before that, you can share that Google folder to somebody else. So essentially, you are updating your OneDrive folder, but the update is automatically getting done in your Google folder, and somebody else is getting the update. This is also possible doing the sharing OneDrive itself, but a lot of people do not have access to OneDrive and they do have access to Google Drive, so I have found it easier to use Google Drive as for sharing and moving the data from OneDrive to Google Drive. If you have other better ways or if you have improvements to this, please let me know. I would be more than happy to share those also, or you can share it. Thank you.